she was crying like I had never heard a woman cry before in my life.
And I just cried for weeks and weeks. Everything reminded me of a baby.
And I kept trying to get up from the table and look to see what was in that jar.
I was dealing with the loss of my unborn child and I didn't even know it.
I believe that my life was spared that night just so that I could be here right now and say abortion hurts women.
Whisper, be silent no more.
Welcome to Faces of Abortion. I'm your host, Molly White, and today I have a very special co-host, Mary Lee Mason. Welcome to the show, Mary Lee.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be doing our closing segment with Julia Holcomb, who will be talking about hope and healing and restoration that comes through Jesus Christ after her abortion. And now we'll be going to the interview with Cindy Collins and Julia Holcomb.
Welcome back to Faces of Abortion. We have the second part of Julia Holcomb's story, which is a powerful story of truth, of abortion, of forgiveness, of healing and recovery. Julia, welcome, and thank you again for being with us on Faces of Abortion.
Thank you. It's nice to see you, Cindy.
I want us to go ahead and start about how your story came out. I know that Steven Tyler began to tell his story about abortion in his life, but there was a part of that story that included your name. So Julia, why don't you go ahead and pick up your story from there?
I never expected to speak in a public way about my abortion experience. My husband and I have been married 31 years, and I had told Brad about my relationship with Steven and my abortion. But we had made the decision together not to tell our children. I can remember being so wounded by my abortion. I didn't want that to touch my children in any way. And so we had not told them. Steven wrote about our relationship in 2 of his books. In the first book, he did not give my name, so I had the freedom to just remain silent. I didn't have to say a word because no one would know that it was me. After he became an American Idol judge, he wrote a second book. He described our relationship and his memories of my abortion. One thing he did use was the words, "Jesus, what have I done?" in relation to my abortion. And that even though he sees it as a little differently than I do, he did acknowledge regret. And that was something that I felt was he did in a very poignant way. Certainly any parent who is post-abortive understands those words, "Jesus, what have I done?" and the regret of an action that you can't take back. But when Steven wrote about my abortion the second time, he used my name in his book. And after that, one of the tabloids, Star Magazine, wrote an article about Steven. They used a photograph of the 2 of us together. They discussed our relationship and my abortion in that article. And my oldest son read it and recognized his mother in it. It was just a shock to my children. We had to do our first Silent No More talk at home in our living room. And I had to tell my sons that I had been in a relationship with Steven Tyler and that I had had an abortion as a young woman. That was a very difficult night. We shed a lot of tears. And my boys had been at our local Planned Parenthood with their local Catholic youth group, praying the rosary for the women who were going inside and offering sidewalk counseling. So it was a hard thing for them to grasp that I had been a woman who had had an abortion, and they had a brother that they would never meet in this world. That night was difficult. But one of my sons was a high school senior, just a wonderful young man. He's about 6'2", he has beautiful red hair, and he is a wrestler. He's a real big boy. And he had tears in his eyes, so did I, but he came over, he almost picked me up in his arms. He hugged me and he said, "Mom, I love you and I forgive you." And that was such a powerful moment for me. I felt that somehow we were going to get through all of this, and that if my family was going to be okay with knowing all about my past, that I was going to have to find the courage to share my story in a more public way. And I wanted to be sure that my children knew without any doubt that I regretted my abortion with all my heart, and that I see each one of them as a precious gift from God.
And Julia, tell us, I know that you had read an article by Kevin Burke with Rachel's Vineyard, and then the Lord led you to a healing retreat with Rachel's Vineyard. Could you share with us a little bit about that?
I was very touched by Kevin Burke's article that he wrote, Jesus, What Have I Done? He discussed Stephen's description of my abortion, and I decided to respond to him in the letter that I wrote. It was a brief story of my experience called The Light of the World. It was published on LifeSite News. And Kevin was so good, he invited me to attend a Rachel's Vineyard retreat. In an email, he suggested my husband and I take a retreat together. And I remember thinking, well, that's nice, but I didn't really think I needed to go on a retreat because I had been to confession, I had been baptized, I had embraced forgiveness from my heart. I was very open to life within my family and my marriage. And I felt, I made a yearly retreat as part of one of, my spiritual commitments. I make a retreat each year. So I felt, that was nice of him to suggest a Rachel's Vineyard retreat, but I didn't know that I really needed to carve out a whole weekend for that experience. But I went to Holy Hour. I make a weekend visit to the Blessed Sacrament. I pray for an hour with my family. And that weekend, I felt Jesus just speak to me in my heart and say, Julia, I want you to make this retreat. I have a gift for you. And I told Brad that I felt like Jesus wanted me to go on this retreat. So the two of us made the decision to go together. And that was very important, that my husband has never participated in an abortion in any way, but he made the decision to go with me as a support. And he got so much out of that retreat experience as well. I personally received so much grace that weekend. I felt like it was an encounter with Christ. I was able to embrace Christ's forgiveness and healing. I was able to name my son Michael and memorialize him. But my husband also had been very deeply burdened by bitterness and anger toward people in my life who had been involved in coercing me into that abortion. He really struggled with forgiveness. And it was, not a good thing in his life to have that bitterness. At our Rachel's Vineyard retreat, he was able to really embrace forgiveness. And I think it was a watershed moment for him as well. So I would encourage any woman or any person who's post-abortive, maybe if you're in a relationship with someone who's had an abortion, or if you're married to someone who's had an abortion, or if you personally are post-abortive, consider having a healing experience like a Rachel's Vineyard retreat or Forgiven and Set Free. There's many good programs out there that deal specifically with post-abortive healing. And sometimes we can think that we've already worked through it, we've made a full recovery, but God has something else to give us. That was what I found when I made my retreat.
I know, Julia, that you went on that retreat and you found healing. Brad found forgiveness for those that had hurt his beloved wife and restoration just for your family. And now you're speaking out. Your children are encouraging you to speak out. I would like for you just to, again, just to speak to women out there and families out there that may have been on the healing journey that you're on, and encouraging them about the voice of women speaking out right now, like we do with Operation Outcry and with Silent No More.
Well, first of all, I always, when I have an opportunity to speak in a media environment, I like to reach out to any woman who may be considering an abortion. If we think about 1 in 3 women in the United States have had abortions, and sometimes we think that abortion isn't close to us or that we don't know anyone who would be thinking of an abortion or has had an abortion, but that's just statistically not true. So to any woman out there who might be thinking or weighing in her mind having an abortion, I would just say stop and think again and choose life. Abortion is never a solution. Abortion makes everything worse. Choosing life is a decision you can live with. It's something that is going to give you you might have responsibilities that you're going to carry, but you are going to have joy in your heart. I look at each of my children as just such a blessing and a joy, and I wish with all my heart I could go back and choose life for my son Michael. The other thing I like to remind women who are post-abortive that God's grace is bigger than our worst sin. Sometimes a woman who's post-abortive feels completely separated from God. I remember that is how I felt, that this was a sin so grave that there was no pathway back to God from here. It's something you can't undo, and so it leaves a woman filled with fear. My personal experience is that God's grace is there waiting for us with open arms if we're willing to just reach out and receive it. There's often the hard work of converting, of repenting, but God is there to help us all along the way. And there's so many good Christian people who have come into my life personally through the church and helped me to make that journey. And I would just encourage any woman out there who is struggling with the grief of a post-abortive experience to look to God, because He's there for you and He loves you and He forgives you. And He has many good things for your life in the future. He wants you to have a life filled with hope and joy and life.
Julia, that's just such a beautiful story, and we really thank you for being with us today and having the courage to share your story and hope and forgiveness in Jesus Christ, and just see how beautiful your walk is with Him and your beautiful 7 children that you have. I know you said 6 boys and 1 girl, 1 beautiful daughter, and knowing that the Lord is using you powerfully to be a voice in our nation in many dimensions, and just seeing the light of Jesus Christ shine from you, emanating from you, even from that picture that is behind you from your grandmother. Julia, we really thank you with being with us today on Faces of Abortion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Welcome back to Faces of Abortion. You've just heard Julia talk about her hope and healing and restoration that came after her abortion through an abortion recovery program called Rachel's Vineyard. And today, Mary Lee is going to talk about being able to meet with Julia. You were there during that interview on her side, and you got to meet her and get to know her a little bit more. What else would Julia like for us to know about her experience?
Molly, it was such an honor to be with Julia Holcomb when we did this series, and she has so much grace and healing with her. And Molly, I'd just like to let you know that the one thing that she really wanted us to know is that the healing's for everyone who's had an abortion.
Yes.
And just being with her was just such a privilege.
That's awesome, Mary Lee, and I know she probably got great comfort of having you there to help her with this interview. And but you said you got to talk with her a little bit more. Was there anything else that she also wants us to know? You know, that healing is available for every hurting man, woman, grandparent, cousin, aunt, uncle, sibling. But is there anything else that she wants the audience to know?
Yeah, Julia actually said that she would like people to know that the choice of abortion leaves a trail of victims.
It does. It's never the solution, is it?
No, it's
never
not.
the answer. It just brings more trauma and more pain and more suffering. Well, let's talk a little bit about Stephen. And we know that Kevin Burke, which is the husband of Dr. Teresa Burke, who is the author of of Rachel's Vineyard,
Right.
he commented on some of the things that Stephen had said, and this is from a post-abortive man. And Stephen said when he was witnessing this abortion and seeing his child, his first response was,
Jesus, what have I done? And Molly, that's a cry. Kevin Burke said that's a cry for the post-abortive men.
It is.
That he needs healing. There's men out there who need healing just as much as the women. And Molly, at the Rachel's Vineyard retreats that I have facilitated, I've had many men go through it. And it has been life-changing to witness the healing of men, not only in their life, but also in their marriages.
Right.
And it's just incredible.
Well, my favorite saying is, when you have a healed woman, you have a healed family.
Yes.
But a healed man actually has a healed family as well, because when we don't allow ourselves to go through that healing, then we're operating out of a very wounded and psychologically dysfunctional state. And it really causes trauma in the whole family dynamics and family relationships. I had a book that I think will really speak to our audience, and just the title of it alone spoke to me. But it said, "Buried feelings never die."
Oh, wow.
So we can bury our feelings about our abortion all we want. We can go numb and run, as was quoted in this article, or we can allow the Lord to take us back to that pain and back to those memories and start healing us along the way. And you find that to be very true in your abortion recovery programs, don't you?
I do. And Molly, also, I answer the phone for the National Helpline for Abortion Recovery. And we have men who call in.
Yes.
And they've had no choice in the abortion. Sometimes the woman goes and chooses to have that abortion, and they have no say in it. And I just would like to encourage any man who's watching this show today, call in if you're in that situation, because there's hope and healing for you too.
I agree. I know one time I was sharing my testimony at a pastor meeting, and as I'm talking and then looking at the audience, one man was breaking down, and I could see him struggling to hold back his emotion. And afterwards, he had the courage to stand up and confess that he had paid for his sister's abortion, which had traumatized him all of these years. It was probably maybe 15, 20 years prior to him hearing my testimony. And he had confessed it, and he also shared that that was the first thing he repented of when he became a Christian. So these memories, these experiences, they don't go away. They don't heal through time, especially something as traumatic as abortion. And so that's why it's very, very important for men and women and even grandparents, anyone who's been a part of losing a child through an abortion decision, should go through a beautiful abortion recovery program such as Rachel's Vineyard. And they're free of charge. Tell us just a little bit about those.
Okay, the Rachel's Vineyard that I facilitate, it's under the new ministry. It's the New Heart of Texas.
New Heart of Texas, that's awesome.
And one of my goals that I believe God wanted me to do is to provide retreats free. So not all Rachel's Vineyard retreats are free, but mine here in Texas are free of charge.
That's awesome. That's all. They're free and they're very confidential.
Yes.
All of the clients' needs are met, so they have a place to stay. They have their food, and their resources that they need, and it's completely confidential if they do not want anyone to know. And I'm sure it's in a very secure and confidential location as well.
It is. And the other thing that with Rachel's Vineyard, men and women can come together, either as a couple, or a man can come, or a single woman.
Yes, that's awesome. I know I have led a couple men through abortion recovery, and some of the things that I've heard come out of their hearts is so upsetting. You know, God created men to be strong, to be defenders of their wives and their children, to be providers, to be protectors. You know, that's what it incorporates man and manhood. And when that is violated through an act of abortion and losing that child, whether they were actively involved in that abortion decision or whether they did not know, it damages a man as much as it damages a woman, except in different ways. And one of my clients told me, I asked him, I said, what does your abortion look like to you? And he told me, he goes, it makes me feel like a big yellow coward. And that broke my heart to hear any strong man you know, that he appears to be strong and have it all together, for him to say he felt like a coward, it just broke my heart. And of course, we did work through those issues. In his particular case, he felt like he did not do enough to save the life of his child, which when I heard his story, to me, he did everything he could possibly do to protect the life of his child. But you can't tie someone up and make them not have an abortion. But the statistics show that 64% of women who've had an abortion say they felt coerced, forced, pressured, and to me, even uninformed is a way of coercion to having an unwanted abortion. And to me, this is the greatest injustice against women in the so-called a woman's right to choose. It has become, legal abortion to me has become the leading cause of exploitation and violence against pregnant women. And we're going to be listening to Alan Parker talk a little bit about that. But in your experience, Mary Lee, have you heard of these kinds of cases in your abortion recovery programs?
Oh, yes. And I would say, I couldn't give you a percentage, but it's a high percentage of those who have been coerced into an abortion, whether by a boyfriend or a mother. And the young girls, when they're 18, 19, sometimes even 16, they're told by their parents that unless they have the abortion, they cannot live at home.
Yes, and that is what happened to me. You know, I was really pressured into having my second abortion and felt so rejected, and I was afraid that I was going to lose my security, that I buckled under pressure and had an unwanted abortion, which was very traumatizing. But thank you, Mary Lee, for coming into the studio and sharing with us about Rachel's Vineyard and meeting Julia. And now we're going to be hearing from Alan Parker, who will talk about how to prevent forced, pressured, and coerced abortions. But before we do, I just want to give out the helpline number again. If you're feeling forced into having an abortion, if you have had an abortion, or if you're pregnant and need help, call this number, 1-866-482-LIFE. And now here's Alan.
Million strong and getting stronger still. They'll remember we were here with a million voices breaking silence till they'll remember we were here.
You've heard the testimonies of women forced to have abortions over and over again on this program. Once abortion is legalized, it allows other people to either coerce, force, or unduly pressure a woman into having an abortion that they want her to have, not that she wants to have. Forced abortion doesn't just occur in China, where it's a horrible injustice by a government, but it occurs in the United States. There's three major kinds when you think about it. Number one, the most common is adult parents forcing a minor teen to have an abortion. And then the second is the father of the child, whether married or single, forcing the woman who's the mother to abort the child because he doesn't want to pay child support or he doesn't want her to be pregnant. And number third is prostitution and human trafficking. Well, at our website of the justicefoundation.org, you can go there and learn how you can prevent forced abortion. Yes, you don't have to be a lawyer, because basically once you know the law and you tell it to other people, you can help empower women to be free of forced or coerced or unduly pressured abortions. The law is that in America and any country where it's legal, no one can legally force you to have an abortion. You don't need to give in. Just say no. That's number one. The second thing that we have there is a letter to the parents that says, "Dear Parent," and you can get this letter, download it, distribute it to all of the youth groups you know, youth pastors, school counselors, social workers, police, anyone who comes in contact with teenage girls that might become pregnant, because you can distribute it to all of them And when you hear that someone is being pressured or forced by their parents to have an abortion, give the Dear Parent letter to them. And basically it tells them, this isn't what you wanted, but there are healthy outcomes that can occur. But you first need to know that the decision on whether to abort the child or to bring the child to life is that of the teenage daughter. She's a mother now, and she has the fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of her child, just as her parents did when she was a baby in the womb. Now, the second thing that this letter tells parents is you may be guilty of fetal homicide, or which is killing a child in the womb. 37 states have fetal homicide laws, and the only ones who can kill a baby in the womb are the mother and the doctor with voluntary informed consent of the patient. You can also be guilty, if you force a girl to do this, of various torts and crimes, including child abuse, kidnapping, and things like that. And the letter also lists some of the things parents say that you are illegal. Like number one, if you don't have this abortion, I'm kicking you out of the house. That violates the duty under the family code in every state to care for your child until they're 18. Also, if you just say, I don't care what you say, we're getting the abortion, I've made the appointment, you're going tomorrow. Well, the young lady may sign the consent form, but it's not her consent, it's her parents or the person forcing her to have the abortion. And that's not the voluntary informed consent of the patient. The abortionists are guilty of malpractice if they don't have informed voluntary consent of their patient. So if you had an abortion and you didn't, it wasn't really your decision, you may be able to sue the abortionist for malpractice for the damage and injury that you suffered. So I urge you to contact the Justice Foundation if any of these situations occur. We also have a Dear Father of the Child letter for a man that says you can't say to the woman, you need to have this abortion. I'm never paying a penny of child support. You'll never get anything out of me. That's his duty under the law. He can't get out of that. He can't threaten the woman with a gun or a knife or physical assaults and threatenings. And this occurs in America. So please go to our website. There's a 1-hour training session that you can listen to on how to use these forms yourself. And then when the situation really occurs, call us and we'll help you. And through the Alliance Defending Freedom, we have a network of 1,000 attorneys across the nation who go to court to protect you from having a forced abortion or someone you know. Abortion by itself is horrible enough, but regardless of your position on that, everyone agrees forced abortion is morally wrong and unjust.
Thank you for watching Faces of Abortion, a production of Operation Outcry. If you would like to make comments about our program or find out how you can get involved, please call 1-866-4-OUTCRY or visit our website, operationoutcry.org. We want to hear from you.
Whisper